Hello and welcome to our event today. My name is Darla Hanley and I'm the Dean of the Professional Education Division at Berklee College of Music in beautiful Boston, Massachusetts. And I am thrilled to have you with us and to be kicking off what is the final event in our three-part series, all hosted this month on the topic of music in the age of COVID. Each panel has been designed to focus on a different part of the world and bring people together to share experiences and engagement that show ways that we have advanced music during a pandemic. Over the past year, I know we have all learned many things. We've adapted, we've adjusted, we've created, and along the way, we found new ways to connect, new ways to make music, new ways to share it and monetize it. Our panels are sponsored by the Berklee Music Business Management Department, Professional Music Department, Office of Global Initiatives, and are made possible with a beautiful, generous donation from the Antonia and Vladimir Kuliev Cultural Heritage Fund. We thank all of the members of the committee, and so today I'm going to list them to give some props to Tanya Butler, Toki Wright, Jason Camilio, Haeju Kim, and Andrew Lin, with special shout outs to Ralph Jaccodine and Chris Wares for taking the lead. Additionally, we offer a special thank you to Barry Lynn from the AVK Fund for supporting our work and ability to engage the world. I know we're all going to be inspired by today's panel, moderated by Toki Wright, Chair of Professional Music, and Professor of Music Business Management, Ralph Jaccodine. So to get us started, I'm going to toss things over to you, Toki.
Thank you, Dr. Hanley. Greetings to all in attendance. Again, my name is Toki Wright. I'm the Chair of Professional Music at Berklee College of Music. Many thanks to the Antonia and Vladimir Kuliev Fund for supporting today's platform. Also, thank you to Dr. Tanya Butler, Chair of Music Business Management, and Dr. Haeju Kim, Assistant Chair of Professional Music, Jason Camillo from Global Initiatives, Christopher Wares, Assistant Chair of Music Business, Andrew Lin, Project Manager for Music Business Management, and Morgan Luzzi, Department Coordinator of Professional Music. We live in a rapidly changing world where we are forced to pivot for our survival, and the past year has made this more apparent than ever. In November of 2020, the BBC stated that musicians and songwriters would lose 65% of their income this year, rising to 80% for those most dependent on live performance and studio work. We also know that nearly 90% of independent music venues across the United States are at risk for closing or have already closed. This data doesn't begin to touch on the implications for mental health, wellness, and the general brain space for creativity. But it's not all doom and gloom. We have found a multitude of ways to become better connected, survive, and thrive. And I hope we can discuss many of those avenues today. We brought together an esteemed group of panelists from across the Americas and Europe to discuss music in the age of COVID. Feel free to ask a question in the chat box and indicate whether you prefer to ask the question yourself. I'd like to pass the microphone to my esteemed co-moderator, Ralph Jaccodine, for some introductory words of wisdom.
Thank you, Toki. These panels, it started in a hotel room in Kansas City, Missouri, about 5 or 6 years ago, when I met this guy named Barry Lynn, who's an author, and he was running Americans for the Separation of Church and State. And he's always on television. He's always debating somebody. He's a brilliant guy, and he's a big music fan. We were at the Folk Alliance International Conference at the time, and we became friends. And he contacted me and said that, you know, I'm part of this foundation, the AVK Foundation, and we give grants to artistic endeavors. So 3 years ago, we put in a proposal and we got a grant. And then last year we got one, and then this is our third. And it was supposed to happen during the pandemic, but it didn't. So we had to wait until now. And this is amazing. And in typical Tanya Butler, Darla Hanley fashion, a one-day session with a panel turned into dividing the world into 3 different panels, 3 different topics. and 3 different days. So this is the third. It's really awesome and ambitious, and I'm so proud of the team. You know, my dad was raised in Hoboken, New Jersey, from Italy to Hoboken, New Jersey, and he was raised during the Depression. So because of that, I can't leave a room without turning off the lights, and you turn down the heat. And, you know, that's 90 years of, you know, our wiring in the Jaccodine family about my dad being raised in the Depression. And now we have this COVID depression, or whatever's going on now. And there's uncertainty, and it's going to stick for a long time. So I'm interested in finding out what is going to stick, what are the good things and what are the tough things, and how we're making our way through them. And you know, I knew it was tough at the beginning of this, that my artist, we had to close down and the tour stopped. And I was with a pretty prominent artist here in the Boston area, and we were in Trader Joe's shopping with our masks. And he went up the frozen food aisle where you should go down the frozen food aisle. And a manager says, "Hey, sir, you can't do that." And he goes, "Oh, okay." And he kind of like goes like this. And he comes over to me and he goes, "Ralph, I'm going crazy. I've been, since 19 years old, is all I do is travel and play for my fans. And I'm going crazy." And this is like a month into the pandemic. So I thought, ooh, this is going to be a tough one. And so, you know, what's going on with the artist is difficult. And then me as a manager and in the industry, it kind of be summed up. Last week, I had a road manager for really big arena acts here. And he was talking, I said, "So how's it going?" This is an interview in front of my class. And he said, "Well, I got COVID." And I go, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear." And he goes, "Yeah." And then 3 weeks later, when I was feeling good, I had a stroke. And I go, "Oh my God." And he goes, "But it's a minor stroke, and I'm working my way through it. And I changed my lifestyle and this and that." And then he started to tear up. Not if COVID and a stroke wasn't enough, he was tearing up, and he says, "You know, I've been on the road for 30 years and I don't know how to stay home, and I don't know how to do anything but my job. And I miss my brothers and sisters out there." And he goes, "And it's the isolation's really getting to me." And this is a big, tough man. And he's been in the business for 30 plus years at the arena level. And he broke down and he was tearing up in front of my students. And it was profound of what this time is doing to people. So it is not all doom and gloom. There's a lot of very positive things coming out of this. And so I'm glad everybody's here. I'm glad I'm doing this with Toki. He's my new brother. And Toki, we got this panel of experts that blow me away. Can you explain who everybody is?
Absolutely. So we have an excellent panel. Nannette Velez is the director at the Latin Grammy Cultural Foundation, which awards scholarships to young musicians. She's worked for over a decade with nonprofits in the music industry. She received her bachelor's degree from Berklee College of Music and a master's degree focused in music education from Universidad Interamericana Recinto Metropolitano. Thank you for being here, Nannette. We also have Chris Cook, who is the co-founder and MD of CMU, a company that helps people navigate and understand the music business through media like the CMU Daily Bulletin, Setlist Podcast, and CMU Trends Library, consultancy, training courses, conference sessions, and research reports, and supports those at the start of their music careers through the Pathways into Music Foundation, which supports music educators and talent development organizations. He's also written the book, the acclaimed book, Dissecting the Digital Dollar. Caleb Chapman is the founder and chairman, chief executive producer of Caleb Chapman's Soundhouse. Caleb is a Grammy-nominated educator, producer, author, executive, and saxophonist, regarded as a visionary and leading voice in modern music education. His band's musicians are between ages of 12 to 18, many of them, and they're regarded as some of the finest in the world. He is a fixture in the Utah music scene and has appeared with artists as varied as Grammy-winning bassist Christian McBride, and has also performed the national anthem at several professional sports games. Welcome, Caleb. We also have Will Wells, who's a producer, songwriter, professional musician, and recording engineer. In 2019, he served as the executive producer and co-writer of the debut album from Anthony Ramos, whom he met while working as electronic music producer, on the Tony, Grammy, and Pulitzer Prize winning hit Broadway musical Hamilton. Will has studied film scoring and music production and engineering at Berklee. While here, he honed his skills as a songwriter, arranger, conductor, and musician. And a large part of his work is dedicated to working with others, especially young people. And since 2009, he has been lecturing domestically and internationally. He's a regular visitor at his alma mater high school in New Jersey and brings in visiting artists for hosting workshops. We welcome all of our guests. And once again, for everyone that has a question, be sure to write it in the chat. If you would like to speak, please do indicate that you would like to speak. And I will pass it back to RJ for our first question.
Yeah, I would like to start with Nannette, who, because you're in the nonprofit world, in the foundation world, and helping other people, especially younger people. And I know as a professor at Berklee, younger people getting into music or in music are struggling like everybody else, but in a particularly intense way. I want to, like, if you could explain what you do for a living, and I know you have given away more than $5 million. How is that money? How can I get that? No, I don't want the money. How do people get that money? How do you raise the money? And then where does it go? And then, if I may, how are the people that that you're helping, how are they surviving during these times?
So thank you. So nice to see everyone, and thank you for inviting me. First of all, it's such an honor to be with all of you. So in the Land Grammy Foundation, we have different types of programs. Our biggest program is our scholarship programs. So we have a Prodigy Scholarship that this year is the Juanes Scholarships, up to $200,000. 3 scholarships for up to $100,000. And we give 40 scholarships of up to $10,000. And that's for students who are currently studying and they need an extra help to finish, or students who are studying all over the world. We give the scholarships all over the world, in Holland and United States, Mexico, all over the world. So each December we open the application process. Students must complete their application along with 2 videos of them playing a cover song, and the 3rd song can be an original composition. And we have a committee that evaluates all of those scholarships and gives them scores. And that's how we have our top winners. So every year we give out 44 scholarships. It's coming our 7th year now, and we've been given more than $5 million in scholarships. We also have programs where we go to high schools and bring our Latin artists to inspire and influence the students, because artists were like the students, right? They once had a dream, and sometimes students think it's all like jets and flying and money and all over. They have to understand, that they have to sacrifice, study, practice hard, and with the help of a sponsor, we also donate musical instruments to high schools in need, approximately $20,000 in musical instruments. So when the pandemic hit, we're obviously a music education foundation. So we struggle, because there's other foundations that are helping, with food, water, helping with rent. So we had to transform all of our programs to see how can we still support our students, and students who just want scholarships to go to the schools of their dreams, and they couldn't go because of the lockdowns and pandemics. So we quickly transformed all of our scholarships and all of our programs to do everything online. So we develop our virtual land grant in the school so we can continue helping and motivating those students all over the world. And we've also helped with music instrument donations, and the teachers have taken the instruments to their students, to their homes, so they can continue to practice, because some students use band instruments, from school. So it's been a lot of help. So we've struggled fundraising, but we've been able to adapt and transform to the virtual online world. And we've received many letters and calls from our students that this has really helped us. This is the time where they needed us the most, where they needed somebody to listen, somebody to help, to continue inspire them. And our scholarships are still going good. So we're on July, we're gonna give 44 more scholarships.
And it's not just to Latin music students?
No, students have to be interested and have a passion for Latin music, but they can be from all over the world.
Great. And one of the questions we had, is it according to need or is it according to talent or?
It's need-based and talent-based.
Great. Thank you, Nannette.
Sure.
And this is a follow-up question that I would like to direct to Nannette, also to Caleb and Will, because I know that you both work with young people. What has this period exposed about music education online, or music education in general, and now converting into this online, this digital space? And how are we preparing our students for the what's next post-COVID?
I can jump in on that. I think what we've all learned through this experience is that music education is incredibly not prepared. We weren't prepared for what we were faced with COVID. And the biggest challenge, first of all, was, finding the opportunity for us to be able to help musicians, both those of us playing professionally, but also our students, to be able to create music together online, and challenging what that looks like, what it is. And of course, I think what we all learned very quickly is that even when we access technology that allows us to create music together, which thankfully, we were able to have a lot of success with, it just the same way these Zoom meetings, this is great that we can have these conversations all over the world, but it's still not exactly the same if we were sitting in a coffee shop together hanging out. That connection, it's a different type of connection, and it's the same for music as well. So just trying to keep this comment brief here so that Will can jump into. I think what we've learned is that we have a lot of work to do to prepare ourselves for the future, because like Ralph was saying earlier, this pandemic, it's not wrapped up yet. The tail of this thing is going to be for at least a few years. And then who's to say that the next pandemic isn't just a couple years away, and we're doing this all over again. And the time to start innovating and preparing for that is now. And I hope this is a good wake-up call for all of us, that we need to leave our fears and our discomfort with technology at the door and get serious about making the ability to create art as musicians much easier and more effective, utilizing the resources that are available to us. And so the good news is we've discovered a lot, we've learned a lot. The bad news is we've got a lot of work to do, and we have a long way to go. And in this process of COVID, we lost thousands and thousands of young music students who aren't going to come back. And so we've got some challenges in front of us. But Will?
Yeah, no, I love that perspective. And to add to that, the first thing that I thought of as this was happening is, and a lot of my peers are saying, oh man, I can't wait until things get back to normal. My initial reaction is I'm 100% not going to wait until things get back to normal, because if I'm sitting here waiting, then a lot of opportunity is going to bypass me. And so, especially there's one particular group that I've been working with for a while called Epic Theater Ensemble in New York. And it's a nonprofit that works with inner city youth. And it was so fulfilling because we had this project on the books, and we were supposed to have a lot of in-person studio time and things like that. And we had to completely go virtual. And so what it created was this opportunity for us to really discover what is at our disposal you know, and in these moments where, you know, all of a sudden they go from creating an on-stage musical, you know, their objective is to rewrite Shakespeare and do what they call a remix. So they remix Shakespeare and really set it in current times and dealing with current issues, which is really beautiful to hear that articulated by the youth of today. But all of a sudden they're making a movie, you know, they had to present it on YouTube live. And so, you know, my involvement was twofold. One was music mentorship. I was working as a mentor with these youth, and at the same time creating music with them and then showing them the power of songwriting and storytelling. And so all of a sudden I'm like, okay, there are a few universal things that we can lean on here. We can lean on a click track, so we know we're all in tempo. So even if we're not in sync at the same time, we can record things to a click. We know we're at, you know, 110 beats per minute. And as long as you have the right key and the right tempo, that's a good starting point, you know. And then we can use technology to align things and make something awesome. And what resulted was, you know, a lot of faith and trust in realizing that there are things that are already here. You know, you can get GarageBand on your phone. That's cool. And then the students were even telling me about new technologies that were emerging that they were using in their music classes. And I think the biggest lesson from that entire thing wasn't necessarily the music lessons that resulted, but more so it was being adaptable and being willing to discover what's going to carry you through this to maintain that creativity and maintain that spark. Because while I was working with the youth to explore ways that we can keep that spark, I was also doing this in my own professional career. You know, I had to produce an entire executive produce and vocal produce an entire album, not doing one session in person with the artist. And it's like, all right, the magic's there. We just gotta, we gotta look inward. We gotta tap in. And if I close my eyes, it's the same thing as me closing my eyes in the booth when you're in the control room, when you're in the booth right there, as opposed to you being however many hundred or thousands of miles away. So that it was a really incredible experience to explore this. And now in the second year of producing a production during a pandemic, now they're thinking even more outside the box of what can we do now? We discovered that we can do so much, not expecting to be put in this situation. So now that we know that we're here, what more can we do? And you know, that excites me thinking about what else can happen.
I mean, Chris, you study the music business and report back to us on it. What is the data show of where we're at right now? And you know, and I love it, and you could speak 2 weeks straight for that. But you give speed briefings, I hear. I love the idea of a speed briefing. But like, if somebody's saying, you know, what's going on in the music industry, how would you respond?
Well, various things. I mean, the first thing I would say for everybody working in the music industry, both artists and songwriters, producers, and then everybody across the entire business. I mean, in some ways, I think one of the most frustrating thing about the last year has been the uncertainty, hasn't it? Because when COVID first appeared, I mean, with my journalist hat on, I remember the first time we really started reporting about COVID in our daily bulletin and on our podcast was actually a US event. It was when the Ultra Festival in Miami got cancelled. And although we knew COVID was coming because other parts of Europe already had the pandemic, but we were still in denial in the UK. And then I remember the Ultra Festival cancelled and then South by cancelled. And we had an episode of our podcast where we talked about that. At the end of the podcast, me and my co-host Andy, we were basically saying, well, maybe this will be the last time we talk about COVID, or maybe we'll come back to it on future editions of the podcast. We were in denial. Little did we know that every single day for the next 12 months, we will be writing about the impact of COVID on the music industry. And then it was like, okay, we've got a month of shutdown. Oh no, actually, no, we've got 3 months of shutdown. Oh no, summer 2020 is cancelled. We're going to focus on, oh no, actually now we're talking about the rest of the year. Oh my God, here we are 12 months later. And, you know, obviously it differs from country to country. It differs around the world. In some countries, socially distant shows are back. In some countries, full capacity shows are back. Here in the UK, we're still, when it comes to live entertainment, pretty much on full lockdown. And we still don't really know when we're going to come out of this. So I think that it's the uncertainty of, you know, are we talking about another month, another 3 months, another 6 months, etc. I suppose from a music industry perspective, one thing that is interesting for me as someone who looks at the entire industry is we know that for the live side of this business, COVID has been catastrophic. We've had a business in shutdown for a year, and everybody on that side of the business has basically been doing, living on nothing, no activity. Meanwhile, on the recorded side of the business, streaming continues to boom. Streaming is still a growth industry. And initially there was a little bit of nervousness about putting out new releases, wasn't there, around the start of the pandemic. And then when we realized it was going to be a long-term thing, people started putting out albums, artists started making extra albums, and streaming is booming. So we've got a slightly weird situation in the industry where we've got one side of the industry in complete lockdown, one side of the industry actually doing very well, thank you very much. And then people in the middle who, depending, obviously the sync business took a hit early on. Merchandise, if you sell your merch on tour, you're not selling. If you sell your merch online, you're doing very well. So I suppose it's an industry where you've got some people who have been catastrophically hit, and then you've got other people who actually, if we're being honest, and obviously there's still the mental health element. We've all had very weird lives for a year. So you could be working at a really profitable bit of the business and still be, finding it a really odd experience. But in terms of financial security, it is this slight thing. We've got one half of the industry in shutdown, and the other half of the industry actually financially hasn't really been affected.
So the side that hasn't been affected is the streaming side. And streaming has gone up, whether it's movies or television shows or music. But I still talk all day long with artists that aren't making anything on streaming, and they think that these are bad things and bad people. How do I respond to that? Like, there's all these great articles about, wow, there's a lot of people making money and everything's going to streaming. How do you respond to that?
Well, I mean, that's a fascinating thing, isn't it? Because if you look at all the different strands of the music industry, all the different revenue streams that a featured artist, a frontline artist has, all the different ways artists make money. Traditionally, the way the industry is structured is that streaming is the one revenue stream where actually often artists and songwriters are on a minority cut. So on live, the artist gets most of them, particularly once you get to a certain level in live, the artist is getting most of the ticket money. When we look at sync, normally it's the artists, the songwriters, it's an equal split or they're getting more. Streaming is a revenue stream for reasons of history, where when the money gets split between the song and the recording gets at least 4 times more than the song. So as songwriters, you're immediately at a disadvantage. And then on the recording side, if you've done a traditional record deal, then the label is probably keeping 80% of that money. And I suppose one of the other interesting side effects of all of this is, I mean, people like me, we've been through our Digital Dollar project that you mentioned in the introduction, we've been having this debate with managers and artists in the UK for years, but it's really put the spotlight back on that debate to the extent now here in the UK, our parliament have been talking about this. We've been having hearings in our parliament on the streaming business model, because it turns out that the one revenue stream that was COVID proof is the revenue stream where mostly some artists self-release and they work with distributors, and they are seeing the majority of that money. But for many artists and songwriters, they're seeing other people in the industry doing very well out of streaming, and they're like, well, hang on a second, how did I end up on such a small share of the one revenue that was COVID proof?
Wow.
We have another technology related question from a member of the audience. This is from Teresa Sebastian, who's asking, how do we publicize our own music through social media by ourselves?
Shall I come in on that, or who wants to?
The floor is wide open.
Well, I'll just quickly come in and then I'll shut up. I think it's in the early part of lockdown, another fascinating thing to see was all of the artists live streaming and turning their kitchens and their bedrooms and their gardens into studios, and live streaming and interacting with fans. And then, of course, in the middle of last year, you then started to get managers coming forward and saying, hang on a second, we're giving all this away. Can we monetize this? And it's been fascinating to see the different ways, whether that's a Patreon model or it's a we sell merch model or it's a ticketed model. But I think one thing that, with all of that activity, one of the challenges is it's fine if you've got a fan base to talk to. If you've got a pre-existing online fan base that you're already connected with, then huge opportunities in the direct-to-fan space. Direct-to-fan is finally coming of age within the music industry. But if you're starting out and you're still in that fan base building phase, where the advice we always give to artists at that level is get out and gig, get out and play live, get playing in front of as many people as you can, because that's how you grow a fan base. And then for a year, you can't do that. So it's like, well, how do you go about finding a fan base online? And I think there's still some research to be done. How have artists been doing this? But actually, I think collaboration is key. Well, it's you've got a few hundred fans, you find 3 other artists with 300 fans each, and then you do something together. You live stream a joint gig. And it's those collaborations which means you can grow your fan base online. You know, putting some money into Instagram to buy advertising, it ain't gonna work. It's collaborating with other artists, piggybacking on their audiences. I think when gigging is out of the equation, that's probably the most effective way to try and find an audience online.
Yeah, I want to echo what Chris just said there and comment on his previous statement. But Chris, I couldn't agree more. And you know, when you look at even the established artists, that's exactly what they're doing. You know, look at, you know, Justin Bieber's biggest hits over the last 2 years. They're all collaborations. I mean, the biggest artists do that same thing. And I definitely agree that, you know, all musicians, whatever level they're starting at, need to take a page out of that playbook, and as far as building their fan base online. But Ralph, if you're okay, I want to comment on what Chris was talking about earlier on your question on the industry. I think that COVID has been, you know, I mean, obviously it decimated the music industry. It just did. It was tough. So we need to focus on the great things that came out of it, though. And one of them is this incredible inequity on the streaming model, because what Chris said is exactly right. I mean, back in the 80s, the 90s, you know, you could have a hit song and you could have a career based off the recording. Those days are long gone. Musicians are now surviving almost entirely on touring. And that includes even the biggest names. I mean, their major revenue streams are coming from the touring, not from the streaming. And so we just effectively took, you know, the only thing that musicians had left to survive with and just took it out of the equation for an entire year. And the results have just been terrible, you know? And so, you know, I really hope as a community, as a music community, this spurs us to working together to think harder about the revenue model for music. I mean, we are going to have to innovate and change it, and we're going to have to do it as an entire industry. And even those people that are making money off of this, because there are the few record labels that are left that are getting that 80% of streaming, it may look good for them today, but if this continues the way it's been set up over the last decade and artists cannot survive, then the music creation is going to suffer. It just has to. There's going to be fewer people doing it. The quality of it's going to be less. And at some point, those revenues are going to stop, even for those that are raping the musicians, you know, through the streaming. And so I think this is a wake-up call for us on all sides of the music equation, from education to the creation, to the distribution, to all of it, that we've got some work to do. And we really need to start just, you know, I think musicians, you know, this is just typical, right? Is that we're artists, we're focused on the art and the creation. I think we, as a collective, need to spend a little bit more time thinking about the business side of this. You know, one thing I like to, you know, that I talk about with both when I'm consulting with businesses and, you know, teaching students, is that if without the business, we don't have the art. And this year was a perfect example of you know, the consequences of us not keeping our eye on the ball enough when it comes to being able to sustain ourselves, our income, our mental health, all of those things. So I'll stop rambling, but I'm just praying that we start to decide that what we're experiencing is not what we want to continue to experience as an industry. So.
Yeah, I agree, Caleb, especially what all of you guys said. We have to transform, adapt. It doesn't work. We have to change it. We have to work on it. A long time ago, when you wanted to study music, you thought you only, well, I'll study flute, harmony, and that's. No, you have to study all over. You have to learn music business, marketing, social media, engineering. You know, you have to know everything. And that way you can contribute, you can adapt, and you can transform.
You know, one of the trends I have been seeing is that it happened about a month and a half ago. I was on the call with this group called the Even. It's industry people, lighting, sound, tech from Nashville, and diversify our stages. And then there's National Independent Talent Organization, and all these organizations I'm having calls with, and they're talking about doom and gloom and loss of jobs and people leaving the industry. But they all got together to propagate the industry, to prop up the industry with internships and question and answers and going to schools. And we're going to get people at Berkeley to talk about these things. But this one woman who does sound lights for Bon Jovi in big arenas. She goes, isn't it funny that these are all my brothers and sisters in the business? We do the same thing, we could be called competitors, but we're all getting together to help out the industry. And they said, and everybody said, I can't believe that, because of this pandemic, we have time. And because we have time, we want to help our industry and grow the industry. And Caleb, what you said is really important. Like we're trying to take care of our own. And, whether we're teachers or mentors or whatever.
I was happy to see a lot of that happen as well. I have a lot of friends who were on quite sizable tours, and a lot of these artists who fortunately did have a foothold in that part of the industry were able to keep their staff on salary throughout this. And even those little stories, I think, gave a lot of hope to people. And there was one collaboration that I was a part of as well with my brother, one of my favorite artists to work with, Anthony Ramos and Ari Lennox. We did something in collaboration with Crown Royal, and it was a cover of If You Want Me to Stay. And all the money went towards keeping these venues, smaller venues across America, open, funding them. And it makes sense if you look at it, from a mechanical point of view of like, an alcohol company who, we're talking about keeping bars and these local smaller venues open, but also there was a lot of spirit and there was a lot of love behind it, because those are the places where, if you're just starting out, that's where you play. We play Rockwood Music Hall in New York. We play Hotel Cafe in Los Angeles. These smaller venues is where a lot of artists get discovered. So it was really, it was really awesome to see people stepping up like that. And then to speak a little bit to the other question that came in about a newer artist, trying to do a release during this time. I had one of my buddies, his name is JP Sachs. He, it's funny, I saw his entire career transition pretty much throughout COVID. He released a track called If the World Was Ending, but even throughout all that, and as that collaboration was picking up speed, he had a scheduled performance every week called his Home Team Live. And he would bring on different musicians to collaborate with, and he would bring on, either, younger musicians, or really it was just the home team, as he called it. It was the homies, but there was a lot of collaboration, like you all mentioned, that was happening online. And it was really interesting to see how people would interact. And I definitely discovered some new people through that. And, I saw, for anybody out there who is an artist who's getting started, that consistency and having something to look forward to, or even creating whatever kind of series there is that you can conjure up. That was awesome. In the same way we all were, I know we were all addicted to Verses at one point. Everybody, that was like the concert at home for a minute, like who was on this week, those things were really creative and creative ways to keep us engaged and have something to look forward to. And in the same way, Clubhouse has blown up, and I have people inviting me to like cafes on Clubhouse now. And I think if you just pay attention, whether it's TikTok or IG Live or Clubhouse or whatever, whatever your vice is, I think that there are many ways to make an effort, but the key is being adaptable, figuring out how you can put on the best presentation, and put yourself in a position to be discovered or put your best foot forward, and you never know who's listening.
And
that's so true.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's okay. I was going to say that was so true. And it's so wonderful to hear all this, because it sucks, everything that's happened, but it was so magical at the same time, because everybody got together. A person was playing, it's like, hey, I'm trying to play live. Hey, do you have Logic? Here's this plugin, use Audio Movers, and you can play and hear yourself at the same in real time with no delays. And you can see everybody in Facebook putting in, all our scholarship students were talking. We're talking to each other and everything. This doesn't work well. We have to change it. This doesn't work, like Caleb says. So something magical happens, and I hope it continues. Well, I know it will. It will continue.
So at the risk of sounding insensitive, are there positive aspects of thinning the herd out in a lot of ways? Less people being able to play at venues, less having to have a certain level of interest, curiosity, it factor for people to attach themselves to you. Is there something positive that's come out of less people having a platform?
I don't know if I mean, I don't know if that's the positive, is having fewer people, but you know, but possibly, but I do think that there are tons. I mean, I think all of us here, Chris and Nannette and Will, I think all of us could talk for an hour each or more or day about all the positives that came out of this year. Because for me, I mean, they're really endless. And I guess, you know, I've been talking about a little bit today about some of the changes I'm hoping we're making, but I'm hoping we're going to make those changes because we've made so many changes this year that are so positive, and there's so many great things that came out of this. I mean, you know, first and foremost, you know, with my day job working with our musicians at the Sound House, I've got 300 kids that are planning to, you know, to go into music. And, you know, pre-COVID, I would have a couple that were working on production, that were learning to run a DAW and to get their hands in that. Man, my business, I'm not a school teacher. I'm a for-profit business. And so I had literally 7 days to figure out how I was going to take 300 kids and 20 band rehearsals. Like, all I do is band rehearsals. So I had to move all of those rehearsals online, and I had 7 days to figure out how I was going to do that. That's a problem I've been trying to work on since 2005, and I hadn't figured it out. And I had 7 days to do it. And we did it. I didn't lose one music student, and we kept them going for 6 months in asynchronous rehearsals online, creating music, recording music. And here's the coolest thing. I only had a handful of kids pre-COVID that were working on production stuff. Within 2 weeks, I had over 100 junior high students that were successfully running BandLab, knew how to record themselves, knew what an interface was, knew how to get their mic levels. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, I could not even believe it. And I'm thinking, why have we not done this before? Like, I thought it was impossible. Not only was it not impossible, it was within a couple weeks, they're all doing it and recording. And so now I've got hundreds of kids producing their own music that we never had that before. I mean, that's just one little tiny thing of a list of like a million. And I bet, you know, Chris and Will and Nannette all have their same stories of like all this stuff that changed. So there is hope, there is great stuff, and there's big things on the horizon for us. And I think this probably jump-started a lot of it. So
Caleb, is that something that you're going to stay there, or is it going to be, are you going to pivot back to like in person, or is this going to be part of your business from now on?
Yeah, so we ran that model for several months. Then I switched, and you know, we had to socially distance, but we're able to open our businesses again. So what we did is took our rehearsal studio, which is several rehearsal rooms, and we wired them. We networked them with you know, the audio and video. So I was able to run rehearsals with these bands across, you know, 4 different rooms in real time with video and audio connections. You know, they're all on headphones. And so we were able to kind of go back in person, not in the same room, but we were in person making music months ago, and we've been able to do that. But to answer your question, is it gonna, you know, are we gonna fully remain online? No, because, you know, all of us as musicians, we want to connect. We want to like, and by the way, yeah, I've got the technology now. We've got the boxes where we can play together synchronously online. The 6 of us could rehearse together. We could record together. We could do it in real time. And it's great that it's there, but I'll tell you, it just stinks compared to the real thing. I still want to go, I want to fly and hang with Will and make music in the same room, you know, like it's just not the same. So are we gonna go fully online? No, absolutely not. Do I want to keep, you know, these musicians using those skills? Absolutely. It opened up the door, it threw the door wide open to kids being able to create music, to write more, to be able to collaborate way more, you know. My son right now, he's 21 years old. He playlist, he's on Apple's alternative playlist this week. He got a record deal. He plays, sings, everything, did all the writing, every instrument, the production, all of it. And he did that on a laptop at home. And he's doing what, you know, so many of my Grammy winning friends haven't been able to do this week, which is get attention online and get playlisted, you know. And how is he doing this? With skills that he learned on his own at home, doing this kind of stuff. So this is how music's being made now. You know, we need to give kids the tools, and we're not doing that. Like, what is music education in school? It's still band and orchestra. Where are the classes where kids are using, you know, learning to use Pro Tools or Ableton? All of that stuff, you know, and this is what we have to move to. And to me, it's one of the most beautiful things of what happened with COVID.
Yes, Caleb, exactly, exactly. I'm pretty sure it's gonna go like a hybrid also, because if with our music education programs, we go to school and we impact 1,000 students, right? And we're like, oh yeah, and then 2,000, 3,000, but all of a sudden we're doing virtual and they can all connect, and we've impacted 20,000 students. So we have to continue this, and we have to do some type of hybrid so we can do it in person, and we can also serve the online and students from all over the world.
So I was in the middle of a class and feeling the weight of all this stuff with the pandemic. And I was talking to a promoter, Adam Epstein, who does a lot of big shows and venues all over the place and festivals. And he came to speak to my students through Zoom. And I was saying, so Adam, tell me about it. And he kind of said, you know, well, we had to cancel 120 shows and this and that. And I go, oh, and I just feeling the weight of it. And he was very positive. And I said, so you seem pretty happy about things. And he goes, yeah, I just closed the deal for my 5th new venue. And he saw when all this started to happen, he went down south and here in America, and he got 5 drive-in theaters, old racetracks, abandoned places that were well located in Alabama, Tennessee, and Texas. And he's opened up 5 venues in 6 months. And these are outdoor. They're going to be the next pandemic safe. And, you know, it was such a great example for my student and me to like, oh my God, out of these lemons, we're making lemonade. Chris, I just heard that Live Nation or somebody is selling hundreds of thousands of tickets for festivals in Europe. Since you're our European person, are you still having festivals? What's the state of the industry out over there?
In terms of the festival season, and it varies from country to country, partly because the pandemic is at different phases in different countries, and then different governments have different policies. From a UK perspective, so officially our government has said that full capacity events will be able to return in England, confusingly in the UK, each country has its own rules on this, but in England from mid-June. So therefore, the hope is that that's going to happen and festivals will return in early July. And so we will miss the first few festivals of the year. Glastonbury won't happen, etc. But that the July, August festivals will happen. Now, will they? We don't know. So I think most festival promoters are desperately hoping that we will stick to this plan and those festivals will happen. And I say similar events elsewhere in Europe where they're on a similar roadmap. There is a hope that events will reappear in July and August. I'm more pessimistic. I can foresee ultimately we're talking about September, October for a restart. The other thing is, even if we can do festivals in July and August, international travel will not be back. So there will be a lapse between when shows can start again and when international travel starts again. Although some people say actually maybe that's a good thing, because it means that for British artists, all the slots at the British festivals will be available. For German artists, all the slots at the German festivals will be available. So actually it might result in some really interesting programs. But it would not surprise me if actually most of these festivals do not happen. And you mentioned Live Nation there. For the independent festivals, one of the challenges is you can't get insurance, you can't get cancellation insurance. So obviously a lot of the costs of running a festival are happening now for events that will happen in July and August. Obviously Live Nation has the scale and the cash flow that it can afford to take that risk. But for independent events, we're starting to see them cancel, even though they think they might be able to go ahead, because they can't get insurance. And one of the big asks here in the UK is that the government back insurance for large scale events. That has happened in some European countries. Our government isn't going to do it. So it might be that some Live Nation festivals reappear over the summer. We will see, but it could be that the independent festivals can't happen because of the insurance challenge.
And is it, when you're talking about fall, is it just for outdoor festivals?
In theory, indoor shows should return over the summer in England, in the UK. As I say, every country is slightly different. Actually, some Eastern European countries have had slightly lower lockdowns generally throughout. So, I mean, there are still hopes that indoor full capacity shows could be back in not necessarily every European country, but some European countries by September, October, predominantly, international travel, no. So again, there'll be lots of slots available for native talent.
Wow.
But I mean, I'll go back to what I said right at the start, but then at every point in this pandemic, we've been, in 3 months' time, things are going to be, okay, we've got to write off that, but in 3 months. So it wouldn't surprise me if actually we're talking about a slow restart in September, October. And I know some booking agents and some promoters who have written off the year and who are basically saying, yeah, nothing really is going to start happening till next January. So yeah, a diversity of opinions, and it is more of that uncertainty. We're desperately hoping there can be some festivals this summer, but ultimately we don't really know.
Will, you going to put on a show tonight or something?
You never know, but
how long have you been in the UK?
A couple of weeks.
Is everything closed down?
Yeah, but again, one of the beautiful things about this year is realizing, wow, I can actually get a lot of work done from anywhere. And there were a lot of situations that arose where, even with some of my closest collaborators or artists that I executive produce or vocal produce for, it's like, all right, we're going to do this at the studio. We're going to call the doc and everybody gets tested, or we could just do this thing virtually, and that's cool too. Whereas, speaking of the great things that were born of this time, and I did want to respond to Toki's question, where my answer wasn't necessarily on the live side about perhaps some of the silver lining that coincided with the thing that, how that impacts competition and how many people can actually play or put on shows or things like that. One thing that was interesting to discover is that a lot of artists really started locking down with their crews, started quarantining. You saw some bubbles popping up, and I know I was definitely very adamant about the safety of that bubble for everybody that I was working with. And there were times where I was in Los Angeles for, pretty much between November and the end of March. And, we had a doc essentially on call, and fortunately that artist had a label, but it really showed you that over time, and this isn't an immediate thing, this isn't anything anybody could have predicted ahead of a pandemic, but if you really do, especially if there are younger artists or management who work with talent that would collaborate with artists, it's worth investing in those relationships. Because, two things. One thing about the digital space, it was a lot easier, and I know that this from a lot of collaborators, songwriters, producers, and artists that I work with, they were a lot more inclined to do sessions with people that they weren't meeting for the first time than they were to do initial meets over Zoom. So that automatically took care of a barrier to entry. So investing in those relationships was worth it. But then when you go back to in-person sessions or shows or what have you, building up that comfort to be included in a squad like that, to say, look, instead of doing a day, doing the whole publisher hustle where you're going to do, perhaps 2 sessions a day, jumping from camp to camp, or, speed dating, if you will, in the songwriting world, you know what, let's lock in for a week. Let's all get tested. We're going to stay in a house together. We're going to make sure we're good, you know, as much as you can. We're going to be honest with one another. So there has to be trust there. And, you know, another thing, you know, the last thing I'll say about this, just thinking, you know, Toki, you got me thinking when you asked that question. And, you know, all I did this entire year, don't get me wrong, and I had my moments, but like I was just thinking about, okay, what's the solution? What's the solution? What's the solution today? How am I going to get these vocals? How can I live in the solution? But I'll never forget a record executive on a team call said, you know, this is really going to show us which of these artists are willing to adapt and who's going to leave this time with the full catalog that's a lot stronger, and who's going to wait until they can get back in the studio and be comfortable making records again. And respect on both sides. But let me tell you, your boy was up in there trying to get that catalog for real. And there were sessions that happened that just never could have happened, where, you know, I was on with somebody from the UK, I was in New York with an artist, and then there was somebody from Los Angeles, and we picked the right times and we made it pop off. You know, so, and that was the energy that really excited me and that gave me hope that we can keep going during a time like this.
I mean, that speaks to the energy of being able to even pull this panel together, because you're all over the place. If we were to try to do this in Boston, you know, would we have even been able to pull it off? Something that you touched on was a question that I had, and it's looking at how professional sports like the NBA bubble and UFC's Fight Island, looking at some of those models, are there any takeaways from how professional sports has gone about trying to bring the norm back that has impacted, affected things that you're like, I'll never do that? What made me think of this question is you saying crews getting tight, locking themselves down in spaces, being very strict about what comes in, what goes out. Are there any other thoughts on the comparison?
Well, you know what? Oh, sorry, Will, go ahead. Oh.
No, I was just gonna say, I got, you know, even for the homies, I got the questionnaire, and it's not personal, but I have a list of questions I'm gonna ask you before I meet up with you. If you just flew in, I'm not getting coffee with you today. It's not personal, but I'm not trying to get, it's not even about myself. It's about my colleagues, my homies. Like, I just want to be responsible, and it really raised the stakes for me. And there were some tough conversations that needed to be had, and some opportunities that I had to not take out of respect for, you know, public health. But, you know, that was one takeaway. And I think if I've seen anything from these bubbles and things like that, is that it only takes one. It only takes one person to be loose with it, or be, or not be completely honest. And it's so, you know,
and there's a message in that. There's a message in that, you know, probably, you know, pre-COVID, post-COVID, about who you let in your circle and who you let in your bubble.
That's it.
Yeah. One thing, Toki, on your question, like what can music learn from sports? I mean, to me, I think we're coming to the end of the mass shutdowns. I think things are going to be opening up. So I'm not sure that the bubble concept with music is something that's going to be as applicable when we're talking about with audiences and such. But I do think, it's been interesting, again, talking about our entire industry, the model that's set up. I think you raise a really interesting question, because we've got these professional athletes who, guess what? They've been working while our musicians have not. Why is that? Because they've got a revenue model that's tied into media, and they're just, it's all entertainment, right? I mean, the Celtics win tonight, I'll be happy. It doesn't really change my life other than that, but it's entertainment. Music is entertainment. So we've got an entire entertainment industry in sports that has managed to still generate some revenues and continue to exist, while music, for the most part, we have not been able to do those live performances like they've been able to do live games. And so again, I hate to sound, just saying the same thing over and over, but we have got to rethink this model. We have got to think how we deliver stuff, because we put ourselves in a position where we can't function. And I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from professional sports. also, just to tag on to that too, you know, what Will's saying, I mean, you know, still being careful with the people he's surrounding himself with. I think there's a danger in that we've got so much COVID exhaustion right now that we think we're done because we've got this, we've got a vaccine. And as Chris is saying, you know, I'm with Chris. I'm a little bit more pessimistic that I just don't think we're all the way over. And even when it's over, it's not over. You know, this is a different type of thing than the flu. And this vaccine that we're getting, I mean, people are like, I'm vaccinated, it's over. No, that's a 6-month to a 12-month vaccine. Now we've got to revaccinate all the millions of people all over again next year. And this coronavirus isn't going away, you know, like we're going to be living with it for a while. So, and then separate from that, whether the virus is here or gone, we've got to deal as an industry with the mentality of people. So you're going to have people that are anxious. They don't care. They're not wearing masks. They're ready to go out and party tonight. But you've got a whole huge percentage of the population. It doesn't matter when everybody's vaccinated and the virus is eradicated, they're still not going to want to go back out into public again. You know, like think about all the people we know that lived through the Great Depression and how those people never lived their lives the same way again. You know, they became hoarders and they were thrifty and all that. That affected their lives forever. We're going to have the same after effects with this, with people that don't want to go out into crowds, don't want to be around people because they don't feel safe and they're worried about it. So these are all things that we need to be talking about and thinking about. And I love, Toki, that you brought up the professional sports. I think we've got a lot that we can learn and improve on.
So I have a daughter that works for a nonprofit in Miami, and she is doing it virtually from her place in Washington, D.C. Nannette, her parents, me being one of them, have been studying what's going on in Florida. And so tell me about what are you seeing as far as you're working at home, beside the beautiful weather, are things opening up safely there? And what's going on with music and concerts down in Florida?
I'm still working from home. I made the decision to send my kids back to school because they needed it. And they've been doing so good with the mask and with protection in their school, in their public school. And they've been very diligent, more than even adults, with their mask and protecting themselves. Here in Florida, everything is opening. I haven't been to a mall in a year because I'm still scared. I've been vaccinated, but I'm still scared. You know, even you can get it even if you have the vaccine. So you have to still wear masks and be protected. Things are opening, restaurants are opening, bars are opening. The live concerts, small live concerts starting opening. I think they should be a little bit more cautious when they do this, especially with masks. If everybody wear masks, we're protected, do social distance, maybe we can open and let it open. But if we don't take care of ourselves or protect and think about the other persons, wear our mask, social distance, and then it'll affect everything. So maybe we can have another shutdown. Please no, but who knows, you know? So we all have, as individuals, we all have to be aware and take those steps to help our community. You know, it's not just me, we affect everybody. So everything's opening. And so now it's opening faster. Now, at bars and everything, I see a lot of bars full of people. But I think we should do a better job with mask and protection and social distance so we don't have to shut down again.
Yeah. I think people are.
Mike.
Yeah, go ahead, Toki.
I was going to say, Mike Stansbury said, think about this, an entirely new economy has been created. PPR, mass delivery services, Amazon. This is billions of dollars. This will not let go. They will not let go of this easily. Plan to live with some form of COVID for the duration. As negative or morbid as this may sound, there are huge corporations that will do everything they can to make sure there is continued demand for their products.
I would just say to that,
say you?
To that, I would say it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if corporations are trying to push it or not, or if political agendas are trying to push it or not, because perception is everything. And people, I can guarantee this, like try to have a political discussion with anybody. You're not going to change their mind, whatever it is, yours, theirs. Like, we're not going to change each other's minds. People's opinions on COVID doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the reality is. It doesn't matter, because people will still have the perception that's in their mind. And there's a lot of different perceptions out there. So my point is that whether or not companies are trying to continue to push it on us or not, or science or not, or any of that, regardless, you're going to have a huge percentage of the population that is not going to return to concerts the same way that they did before. So we just need to, I mean, that's the theme of this whole thing, right? That's what everybody here has been saying. It's adaptability. Mike, I think, made a comment earlier about, well, you know, he said, well, I don't like the idea. Sorry, Mike, if I'm paraphrasing here, I'm trying to remember your exact comment, but you know, like that more people are creating music at home, because how's it going to support these big studios? Like the photo that Will's got there. And you know, we got to be understanding as an industry that it's okay. Like, we don't necessarily have to keep, actually, we need to know that we shouldn't be keeping things the same. If we are trying to preserve everything the way it is, our industry dies. That's how it works. You know, are there still steel mills like there were in the 20s and 30s? No, they're gone, because we have different things now. You know, the computers have replaced all kinds of industries that are just gone now, because we have computers that handle those things. That's okay. It's okay that maybe big recording studios don't exist the same way they did before, that we're making music differently. Like, we need to embrace technology. We need to embrace change. It's always going to happen, and we need to adapt. And those that are willing to adapt have a future. Those that aren't, it's rough, you know? So,
But Caleb, with all the students you have, you're also dealing with their parents, I'm sure. What percentage of the people, the parents say, should my son study music? Like, can he get a job? Can he make a living? How do you respond? Especially these days.
yeah, you know what? We use music to prepare. All the kids that come through here are prepared to be professional musicians if that's what they want to do. I'm very proud. We've got one of our seniors this year got offered full tuition scholarship to Berklee next year. She'll be attending there. Saxophonist, yeah. So we prepare kids at the very highest level to succeed in this industry. With that being said, these are accomplished students. They really are. And the vast majority of them are not choosing to go into music as a career. A lot of them will major in music in college, but using that as a stepping stone to a graduate program in law, science, medicine, business. It is, you know, it's getting more and more difficult to convince kids to, you know, to find, I've never tried to convince any kid of what they should do for a career. I want them to find that. Do I think we need millions of more musicians right now? I don't. I think the model it's so difficult to survive in. And I would hazard that those of us on this call today, you know, I mean, at least speaking for myself, I wear about a dozen different hats in music. You know, I'm a professional performer. I'm an author. I'm a business executive. I'm a teacher. I mean, you name it. And I do that so that I can have a career in the field that I love. But if I was just going to be a jazz saxophonist, forget it. You know, I would have left that a long time ago. So it's tough, Ralph, we don't have a lot of kids choosing it as a career.
But, you know, some of the problem or the solution is somebody like Will coming to speak to students, and they go, oh my God, look at that guy. He's working with Hamilton. He's in London. He's in Los Angeles. I want to be that. And Will is one of those people, like, makes it look easy. And and that's awesome. But Will, what do you tell those parents that, you know, like it's like seeing a professional athlete. They make it look so easy. But do you guide people to the career of music, or?
I let them know that talent will only take you so far. I think Will Smith said it best once in one of those almost Upworthy videos or something. It is actually literally the hard work. You know, I entered Berklee on the smallest scholarship, and I had to work so hard, you know, and actually having to work that hard to then prove that I was worthy of perhaps more scholarship money, but then even having to have to pay my way through college and work extra jobs and have a gig, you know, down the street on Mass Ave in order to pay rent because I couldn't afford student housing, things like that. I realized once college was over and I had to go to Los Angeles, or I didn't have to, I chose to go to Los Angeles, but had to work to survive. I was like, oh, cool. Yeah, this is what I've been doing the last 4 years. Like, this is what I know to do. And that's just part of the gig. It was almost that extracurricular stuff that set me up, you know, as much as the curriculum in school did to survive. And so I just let them know. I let these parents know, like, look, you can do this, but it's not going to be easy. It's not, you know. And there's one thing I don't want to forget to mention, because, you know, I'm looking at, not to call you out, Mike, but I'm looking at some of these comments, especially the engineering thing that you said earlier. And I will have you know that, you know, I did music production and engineering as well. And this year is one of the most important years for me for having an education in engineering, because I really had to depend on that education and my ears and not muscle memory in the studio. And I'm dealing with major labels. There were 2 separate major labels where all of a sudden everything moved virtual. And I had to prove to them that the quality of recording they would get, you know, under my umbrella for the artist that I was representing would be the equivalent of what, or as close to the equivalent of as what we would get from the studio. And so, you know, fortunately, again, I'm dealing with budget, so I know that this isn't perhaps the layman position or the commonplace position for people to be in, but I was able to spec out specific gear based on that engineering knowledge, a mic pre, an interface, the software, whatever subscriptions we would need in order to at least, you know, I may not have been a Telefunken 251. They're not going to pay $12,000 for a new or $20,000 for a vintage, right? But I could at least get a decent amount of gear within a certain budget to know that I can get a quality product and know that I can control that technology virtually, so I can use my ears and understand when I was overloading a mic pre, understand when there was comb filtering because they were in the corner and all of a sudden reflections were bouncing off and frequency sounded weird. That I was depending on my engineering education and knowledge and really thinking through things. And I had to FaceTime. I recorded a drummer. That thing I did with Ari Lennox and Anthony Ramos, all of the music was recorded virtually. Saxophones, trombones, drum kit, everything. So I had to FaceTime with the drummer and the person he had helping him, say, show me the microphones. I'm hearing that some stuff is out of phase. Let me talk you through, based on my education. I know from looking at things, based on that, let me talk you through how to fix this mic placement so that we can get a competitive result. And so your education is not in vain, but you have to pay attention, be prepared to be nimble, be prepared to adapt, like we've been saying the whole time. But it's not in vain as long as you can figure out how to take that knowledge and equip yourself with that. And you know, and fortunately that saved my entire year and then some. Other things started popping up because all of a sudden I was the guy who knew how to get the virtual thing popping. And so more work that I didn't expect started coming. But you know, again, I'm so grateful for the entire MP&E department and everything that I learned from them, because this is when I really got to put it into practice. And I really got to see, especially when you're trying to teach an artist how to connect equipment, that's when you know, when you have to teach something, you know if you actually understand it yourself. And so I'll leave it there. But that's, you know, I know I'm passionate, but that's encouragement. You know what I mean? I just want to encourage you. It's not in vain. And take what you learned and really run with it, because there's a lot you could do with that, especially in a time like this.
I want to send one over to Harmeet in the audience has a question. Go ahead.
Guys, thanks so much for being here. So just the last thing I've seen over the last year was mainly just the increased like commoditization of music and creators in general, just in the music space. So what do you guys think about that, first of all? And secondly, for this, or for somebody working on an artist team, how do you approach finding a balance between obviously paying your bills, having income come in, but at the same time maintaining this artistic integrity and the sort of the creative force behind your work, which at times is at odds with what a client might want you to do, for example, but they're still a paying client? Or somebody who views you as less than what you're worth, or views you as, I'm sure a lot of clients who book people for gig understand that you have to get to the gig, you have to rehearse for the gig, all the time that goes into that. Think about that, for example. So what do you guys sort of just think about that? Sort of where is that going from? Where do you guys think it's going? How do you think it's changed?
Anybody want to jump on it?
This is a Chris Cook question if I've ever seen it.
Yeah, that's a great question, Herman.
He has a lot of degrees. He's a lawyer. Come on, Chris.
Well, I suppose, I mean, first of all, I would echo some things that other people have said before, is I think anybody working in music, whether that is as a musician, a songwriter, a producer, or indeed on the industry side, we're all entrepreneurs, aren't we? Whether you're having a portfolio career where you're constantly session playing and producing, et cetera, or you're a frontline artist and you're building a fan base and a business around your music, everyone has to be an entrepreneur. And I guess, I mean, coming to your point, we all have to balance the projects between those projects that pay the rent and those projects which we're doing because we creatively enjoy them. And I think that's true across the entire industry and always has been. I suppose it is true that in the last year, well, I don't know, with some musicians, because it's been so hard to make money, particularly if you predominantly are more on the session side and the live side of the industry, then maybe if a project comes your way, you have to take it because you need the money. The flip side of that, and again, the experience varies hugely, doesn't it, from country to country, because in some European countries, there has been financial support for artists and musicians. I mean, not huge amounts of money, but enough to pay the rent. So in some European countries, actually the opposite has happened, which is, okay, they've not had a luxurious year, but they've had that support, which meant that they could pay rent. And actually they've had a year of being all the creative projects, that big to-do list of creative projects that they've never quite got down to because they always had that project they had to do to pay rent. Suddenly they've been able to do that. So I think it's just an unfortunate fact of life of being a creative entrepreneur or whatever discipline you're doing it in, that you're always balancing the work that brings in money and the work which you're doing just for creative stuff. Obviously, there's always some happy medium, isn't there? There's some projects which bring in money and you love them. So I suppose there is stuff in the middle. But I think that is unfortunately just part of being a creative entrepreneur in whatever the discipline is. And it is just trying to find that balance. And also, what is it that you want? I remember a few years ago, the Great Escape, which is a showcase festival where I curate the panels, we had Dave Rowntree, who was the drummer in the band Blur. And he actually had a radio show at the time, and we were talking to him about getting airplay. And he said how, as a band, if you want daytime airplay, you've got to make music that will get daytime airplay. And you don't have to have daytime airplay, but if that is what you want, then there has to be tracks on the album that will get daytime airplay. And then maybe on the other tracks, you do something more unusual. Actually, I want to go back to Dave Rowntree and ask him that question again, because I suppose there is an issue that in the streaming age, those album tracks that you do because they're creatively magnificent probably will never get listened to because of the way streaming works. Whereas in the album age, you got the airplay from the hits. People bought the album, they listened to the album, and then they learned to enjoy the stuff that's creatively different. So yeah, I think there are all sorts of trends in play that have an impact on what you're describing, but it is just the harsh reality of being a creative entrepreneur is balancing those projects, and some will be predominantly for money and some will be predominantly because you're creatively excited about them.
Right. Caleb, do you have something to add to that?
I actually wanted to just wrap up what we were talking about before, so I don't want to derail this too much. But just Ralph, I did want to just finish up your question about telling our kids about a career, and so just to put a button on that topic, so I think up to this point, because of the industry the way it is, we've had not a large percentage of kids choosing to go into music as a career. However, based on everything we're talking about right now, what I'm excited about, and again, as a result of COVID, is we're seeing a lot of massive changes in what's happening in everything, not just music, but change means always opportunity. And so we're seeing a lot of excitement from, I think, because, now all of a sudden, all of our musicians are learning production skills and songwriting and online collaboration and being able to go to sessions like this with panelists and clinicians from all over the world. I mean, this is opening up all kinds of doors and opportunities. It's very exciting. And I think that, you know, that's why I'm such a big fan of Berklee and what Berklee has done during this. You know, I participate in some of the sessions that the bass department has done with Victor Wooten and Steve Bailey. I mean, just incredible sessions. All these things are going to propel this industry forward. And I think you're going to see a lot of incredible opportunities for musicians that weren't available before. And you know, what Will was saying before we actually started the session is, you know, I mean, his passion for technology, you can tell his success comes from his dedication, his work ethic, his commitment, his talent, but then also the fact that he's embracing technology, and it's put him in the successful position that he's in today. So I do think that the future is bright for music. I think we are at a turning point, and I'm so grateful, Ralph, to you and Toki and the entire Berklee team for what you guys are doing as an institution, because I think it is one of the few places that are really making the tools available that musicians are going to need to pivot and embrace kind of the future of this industry.
Yeah.
I would just echo. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, I'll just very quickly say, totally echo that. I mean, obviously, not to downplay the huge challenges that people have faced, you know, financially and economically, and in terms of their mental health in the last 12 months. And obviously, as an industry, and hopefully in some countries at least, government has a role to play there. But all of that aside, I would totally agree. Out of the chaos comes opportunity. And if you go back 15 years ago, almost we were in the reverse situation in the music industry, which was that the record industry was in freefall, because we were in that difficult position of going from selling plastic discs to digital. And every year the record industry was making less money, labels were going out of business. Okay, not to the extent of the impact of COVID on live, but nevertheless, it was not a fun time to be in the record industry. Meanwhile, live was booming. So, you know, 15 years ago, the total opposite was happening. But I remember at the time, there's a British artist manager called Tim Clark, manages some big artists over here. But back in the day, he ran Island Records, back in like the early days of the British record industry. And I remember him saying to me in the mid 2000s, this is the most exciting time to be in the record industry since the 60s. Because in the 60s, nobody knew what they were doing. Everybody was making it up as they went along. And that was really exciting. Chaotic, but exciting. By the 90s, you had these CD producing machines who controlled the media, they controlled retail, and they just put out all these things. And then by 2005, that had all collapsed again. And it was like, this is a really exciting time to be in the record industry. Now, I'm not suggesting the last 12 months has been an exciting time to be in the live industry, but I think maybe the next 12 months might be. That as the live industry reboots, there was lots of things wrong with the live industry. So, you know, can we have a rebuilt live industry that addresses some of the issues of the old live industry? And I think there are, you know, some fantastic opportunities ahead for artists and for promoters and for venues and everyone on that side of the industry.
On that thought, we are almost out of time, but real quick, I usually take a subway from my house to Berklee, and I have about 40 minutes to read my little newspapers on my devices. And when I get out at Mass Ave, I am usually very depressed and angry at the world. And I have about a 5-minute walk to my office. And I always ask myself if my time at Berklee, teaching and sharing with these students, does it matter? Does it matter for anything? And it hit me when I was talking to Toki today, because he's in Minneapolis, and he's miles away from where the George Floyd event is going on right now. It's changing our planet. And you know, the answer is that I won't teach at Berklee if I think that my time doesn't matter. And I don't think if music doesn't matter, then I'm out, you know? And I feel like I'd like to share that sentiment with the people on the screen and the people watching this, that music does matter. Music is a powerful force, and we're all passionate about it in some capacity. Toki, thank you for partnering me and everybody here. It's amazing. This foundation that gives us money, it's money and it's power. But the Darlas and the Tanyas and the Jason and the Andrew and Hey Ju, I think I got everybody, and Toki. They're just wonderful partners. Thank you for all that. And I hope we set off little sparks somewhere down the line. Thank you for your time, everybody.
Thank you, Ralph.
No,
Darla?
thank you. Thank you, guys.
you so much.
This was great. And what Ralph just said, if in my case, if there wasn't any music, what the heck would I do? That's the only thing I want to do. So you do it because you have to, right?
But Nannette, I also, while we were doing this, I applied for the $100,000 grant. So I'm just saying.
Good luck.
Check your email. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you all.
Take care.
Thank you for your time.
Great.
Take care.